Hello and welcome to the Transfers podcast, powered by FootballTransfers.com, a new podcast where we aim to bring you the news before it becomes news, as well as insight and analysis on that most important of the least important things, football. I'm Duncan Castles, and I'm joined this week by Julio Gomes Filho, columnist for Wall Esporte, an analyst for Banji Sports, and a commentator for Paramount. Julio has covered 6 World Cups, ghosted Roberto Firmino's biography, and was trusted by none other than Cristiano Ronaldo to break the news of the forward's wish to leave Manchester United for Real Madrid in 2008. I think of him as the Kaká of Brazilian football journalists. Fast, direct, and highly entertaining. Julio, welcome to the Transfers podcast.
Thanks for the words, Duncan. Hello, my friends. It's a pleasure to be here again. Memory of our great friend Ian McGarry, great guy. And hopefully we have an entertaining hour, as you said. And thanks for the words again, Duncan.
Entertaining and an in-depth analysis, that's what we're aiming for. We're going to be talking about Kylian Mbappe, Vinicius Jr., the best young Brazilians headed to Europe this summer, and how player development and club ownership is changing in Brazil and impacting the global game, among other subjects. But let's start with some news from Mbappe's very soon-to-be former club, Paris Saint-Germain. The Transfers podcast understands that Luis Enrique has asked the club to focus their efforts on replacing the France international not on a number 9 central striker, but on a left winger with a right foot who prefers to play off the wing, much in the way that Mbappe prefers to play off the left wing as a striker. One of the top options for the position is Napoli's Georgia international, Kvaratskhelia. He's 23. He was the Serie A player of the season in his first year at Napoli when they won the Scudetto. He himself scoring 12 goals and creating a large number of them for the team. He's fast, like Mbappe, excellent one-on-one, and one of the very best pressing wingers in Serie A. PSG have made a salary offer to the player, but I'm told by the club they've not made an offer to Napoli as yet. But they're aware that the asking price from Napoli is going to be over 100 million euros, which they think is too high. And they're also concerned that with Antonio Conte due to come in as Napoli coach, that the transfer will be blocked. Alternatives include, or have included, Marcus Rashford, a player that PSG have pursued for 2 seasons now, and interestingly, would be available for transfer by Manchester United if the right fee was offered. However, I'm told that PSG are not focusing on Rashford because Enrique sees him more as a number 9 than a left winger. Other elements that PSG have put in place is to agree a deal for initial 80 million euros with Krasnodar in Russia for the Russian international goalkeeper Matvei Safonov, who they want to come in to put pressure on Gianluigi Donnarumma. And despite strong interest from English clubs, they intend to bring Dutch attacking midfielder Xavi Simons back from a highly successful loan spell at Leipzig for the coming season, as they focus even more on youth and on what PSG President has been talking about as the team. He's been giving interviews this week asking about who the new star of PSG would be with Kylian Mbappe leaving. And he's talked about the star for PSG being the team. Julio, when you look at PSG, how they did this season with that younger squad, and you see clearly the best player in their team exiting for a direct competitor for the Champions League, can you see a way in which PSG can be stronger without Kylian Mbappe in their squad?
I can't. Actually, from distance, obviously, I'm not following daily news and rumors, and you have so much inside information you're giving us, Duncan, and it seems to me they're trying to find another great player, but I see from distance PSG phasing out. I mean, Qatar phasing out. Obviously, PSG changed its level I mean, it was in terms of European football, it was a mediocre club, not relevant at all. And now they are. But I don't see PSG doing what they did in the last years. You see, Qatar has already hosted the World Cup they wanted. Sports washing went on. They had Formula One races, MotoGP races, and everything. Qatar is already normalized by the West. And so I don't think they need to spend that amount of money in new players. And I don't think that's the main thing. I don't think players, the big ones, the big stars, ever respected PSG. You see, I think players see PSG as a place to get a lot of money. I think they could not build as a club this atmosphere of a big club that should be respected above players, you see.
Yeah, that's certainly been a problem with PSG, and it's one, if you talk to people within PSG, they recognise. They feel they made a mistake. They feel they made a mistake with Neymar, retaining him, giving him a new contract. They feel they made a mistake with Messi, with Sergio Ramos, sort of loading the team up with these superstars on high salaries, and also with the 200 million euro a season, that's the rough cost to PSG deal that they did to keep Mbappe at PSG and stop him from going to Real Madrid a couple of years ago, one which backfired on them, and which they're still dealing with. So at the moment they're in the midst of negotiations with Mbappe on how much he will return of his final season salary. PSG are expecting to get around 100 million back, but it's not actually, I'm told, written down in any contractual form. So they placed themselves in a complicated position and a kind of embarrassing position in many ways. And I think their strategy, they're shifting radically to the strategy of, let's go for younger players, let's go for a team ethic. So I think a lot of what you say is spot on there. What about what happens with Mbappe at Real Madrid? He's had those 7 seasons at PSG, some of them against his will, as we know. He's had more flirtations than a teenage virgin with Real Madrid, and finally gets to move to the club he had a crush on when he was a kid. A huge signing on fee. I'm told he's secured 50% of his image rights, which is unique at Real Madrid, and done all of this in a way that they can keep his formal salary down to within the boundaries or close to the boundaries of what other players have there. But ironically, he's moving to Madrid, to a team which has one of the other best left-sided forwards in football in the squad, in Vinicius Jr., your compatriot. How do you see that working between the two of them?
Yeah, that's interesting. I just to wrap up the PSG thing, I think Kvaratskhelia is a great one. Yeah, and okay. if they can take him for a lower price, because obviously his season wasn't that good, last one, that would be great. I think he's a great player. On the other side, yeah, Madrid. I can see that working, Duncan. Many people here in Brazil are saying, "Oh, Mbappe is going to destroy Real Madrid's dressing room. Dressing room." I don't see it that way. Exactly for the same reason I said PSG never got the respect from the players. That's quite the opposite in Madrid. I mean, the players, I think they are kind of humbled by the club. You see, it's when you get there, it's Real Madrid. I mean, you cannot go there and do whatever you want. Real Madrid, somehow they can manage to treat players as spoiled stars and professionals at the same time. It's unbelievable. I don't know the magic they're able to do there, but they basically, since the Galacticos, where it definitely didn't happen this way, right? So it was a whole mess there. After that, they changed somehow. They are more professional, but at the same time, the players feel well there as stars, right? You know, before talking about how Mbappe and Vinicius can play together, just a quick story. Someone from within Madrid told me, from inside Madrid, last summer, they Vinicius asked the club to sign Bobby Firmino, right? From Liverpool, actually from his free agency. And the club understood it would be a good move, but eventually didn't sign him. They went after Rossello because they were kind at their limits of Brazilians. they didn't want one more because then it could become a gang.
Then it becomes a samba party, as they like to say in Portugal.
And it did work for so many clubs throughout history, but it didn't for Real Madrid, right? I mean, three or four you have to have, but then 5 or 6, too much, too many Brazilians. It's a story someone inside Madrid told me. It might be true, and there are more coming, right? But in the end, I think Vinicius and Mbappe will work together. They're too good, Duncan. I mean, they're simply too good. And when players are, unless they don't get along, and that's a different subject, a different story. Yes, it happens in football. We've seen it happening in so many places. Superstars don't love each other, and then you have a problem. But if and they're kids, right? I mean, they have everything to be friends and to get along. But
25 and 24 years of age, yeah.
Exactly. I mean, they have the same interests. They both love football, and I think Mbappe will not get there challenging Vinicius, let's say, kingdom, and I don't think Vinicius has this personality of he wants and needs to be the number one as Neymar had. I think they're different in this sense. But tactically speaking, you could see Vinicius playing kind of a center forward, false nine, if you want, in the last games. It did happen. Rodrygo is a player who is being sacrificed during all those years because his best position is as a left winger coming from outside to the inside. That's how he plays best. That's how he played in Santos before being signed for Madrid. And Ancelotti decide to use Rodrygo as a number 11, let's say, and Vinicius in the more centered position. And it worked with Bellingham just behind him, right? And it worked. And Vinicius proved that he can play somewhere else, not only as a left winger. And I think at the same time that Mbappe will do that naturally, as we saw Romario did, as we saw Cristiano Ronaldo do. They were wingers and they became center forwards because they are so good striking, right? Scoring.
Yeah.
They are so good inside the box. I don't know if Vinicius will be that good in his career, but I do know that Mbappe will. So through the years, if they play together, if they really play together for, 4, 5, 6 years at Madrid, nothing else happens, and they stick together there, I can see perfectly one of them, mostly Mbappe, playing as a center forward, and they are too good not to fit. You see, that's how I see things happening. I don't see this disastrous partnership forming that so many people are seeing.
Madrid certainly have the coach in Carlo Ancelotti, who is a specialist in taking the talents of individual players and placing them in areas on the field, or giving them the responsibility almost in areas of the field so that they can optimize performance. He's not wedded to a particular tactical positional system where it would be more complicated having two players who prefer always to play off the left. You mentioned Vinicius Jr. in the context of Neymar. Do you think he has an advantage in his career compared to Neymar because he doesn't have the same kind of baggage around him in terms of his father and representative Napalm, as we sometimes refer to him among friends on this podcast?
Oh, definitely. I think it ruined Neymar's career. Well, obviously Neymar's career was still good. he was one of the best players of his generation. But I think we all agree Neymar wasn't what he was supposed to be, or he should have been a better and more important player in the history of football. He's top scorer in the history of Brazilian national team, which is something, isn't it? I mean, we're talking about the most important national team ever, and he's the top scorer, and nobody respects that number in Brazil, you see. So everybody's putting it in perspective. Oh, he played more games. Oh, he played against worse teams and so on, which I think is a bit unfair, but that's his fault. And that's Neypai's fault. I mean, he treated his son as a marketing product, and Neymar, I think Neymar is divorced from football since 2017, since he moved from Barcelona to PSG. That was a horrible move, and he was never the professional he should have been to achieve bigger things. And I don't see that happening with Vinicius. I see a more focused guy, more. I think he's got a more professional entourage. You see, you don't have the family. Of course, he is a product as well. He's not only a football player, but he doesn't. Apart from the fight against racism, which is super. How can I say that? It's you have to only say good things about it. I mean, it's
the bravery to speak out.
Exactly. Thanks for choosing the right words. Yeah, it's a brave fight. It's a very courageous attitude, and sometimes it might be affecting him. It's maybe it's too much for one single guy to sort out one of the biggest problems the human race had and has. So, but apart from that, he doesn't seem to be worried about being a star. He seems more worried about playing football. It's a different attitude towards sports. So I don't see Vinicius having the same problems or losing focus as Neymar did.
I think that's a key element that we've both seen through our careers in football journalism is the guys who make it to the very top are obsessed above all with winning. They love the game and they want to achieve maximum on the pitch. And the ones who get focused on status or off the pitch or money moves
or golden balls.
Yes.
Yeah. That's one of the main things, I mean, concerning Brazilian players. I mean, that's a characteristic of Brazilian people, of my country here. Yes, individual prizes sometimes are regarded as more important than the title, the club title, which is a completely different mindset you find in Europe, and it's part of our culture. I mean, players since they're kids, or everybody, all of us, since we are kids playing football, when we are 7, 8, 9, 10, we are regarded, we are seen as good or not for our individual efforts, not for our team efforts. That's something, that's a wrong mindset, in my opinion, we have in Brazil, but it might be the secret for having so many, or one of the secrets for having so many very, very, very good top players, because they are since childhood taught to be the best themselves, right? But when it comes to professional world and football and this team sport, which is football, and more, right? It's more and more a team sport and less an individual thing. When you had this obsession for being the best individually, the golden balls, the best of FIFA and whatever, you are in the wrong path. It won't work. And it clearly clouded like Neymar's path and way of playing football. And I don't see that in Vinicius. I saw so many times people asking him about golden ball, being the best. What does he think about it? And he always escapes from this answer, from these questions, right? He always dribbles it. I don't see Vinicius obsessed by being the best or elected the best. And he could have been talking about that for a while, isn't it? I mean, 2022, I think in the season, during the season, I think he was better than Benzema. I think it's a good debate. It's a good debate. You could debate that, Benzema or Vinicius in 2022, but he never got into it.
So let me ask you a question about this individualism that you've identified in young Brazilian players, because it fits into this topic of young Brazilians coming to European football. Vinicius was one of them. He was signed as a 16-year-old by Madrid for the then second highest transfer fee for a Brazilian player moving to Europe. They're just about to bring Endrick from Palmeiras, again signed as a 16-year-old. 16 and 4 months, something like that, when they agreed what I understand to be a fee of 35 million plus 12 in bonuses plus the taxes paid. We're going to talk a little bit later about Estevao Willian. Rodrygo was a similar young acquisition by Madrid. Is it the case that because you have this focus on individualism, that these young players rise to the surface very rapidly in Brazilian football and then get picked off by the top European clubs in a way that doesn't really happen in other countries?
I think there are lots of things that can explain these moves, these recent moves. Mm-hmm. One of the reasons, obviously, the bodies are changing and clubs are using 16s and 17s more often because they can see them fit for professional football.
Okay.
And I think physiology will have a word in the next years, because let's pay close attention to see if the clubs are not breaking these bodies. Yes. Are not breaking those bodies. You can see what's going on with the youngsters in Barcelona, right? Lots of them having lots of injuries. So maybe it's too much for a 16-year-old. But yeah, in Brazil, it's clear that the clubs understand now that European clubs are chasing them when they are younger, and they are acting accordingly. So maybe a player who is 16 or 17 and that the club would wait 1 or 2 years to play him for the professional side, they are no longer waiting, because they know that if those great kids play in the big stage, they will be seen and they will be more expensive. So the clubs are doing that on purpose, because, I mean, what's the point? Let's play them. If they're good, I can use 1 or 2 years of those guys.
Yeah.
Endrick, for example, helped a lot Palmeiras last year, winning the Brazilian championship. Vinicius didn't have the chance to help much Flamengo. But yeah, Palmeiras are already playing Estevao. He's already a starter, basically, and he's turning 17 now. So they are playing them because then they can sell them for a higher price. And if European clubs are chasing those guys in Brazilian academies already, I mean, if this is happening already, I mean, you cannot fight against it. So yes, everybody's rushing, basically, and using those guys at a younger age. But
and
at the same time,
that way you at least get 2 years of them playing for your first team in Brazil, because they can't move until they turn 18 under FIFA rules.
Exactly, and it's a shame, because, well, I have a theory that I'm thinking a lot about this theory, that for European clubs, it would be better to get the Brazilian players having lived more things in their careers. Because playing for a Brazilian club, big one, I think it's harder than playing for a big European club. No, I'm sure it's harder. Okay. The pressure is higher and the conditions of playing are harder. you play in worse pitches, you play in under more pressure, you play more often. The calendar here is crazy.
Mhm.
Basically, you win a big game on Sunday and you're being threatened of that on Wednesday on the very next match. You see, it's a different atmosphere. I'm not saying it's a healthy one. It's not, but it forms big, stronger characters. You
Okay.
see, and when a player leaves all that before going to Europe, when he gets to Europe, it's easy task to play for Real Madrid or Chelsea or Manchester United. You see, because they are so used to it already. You formed. Maybe you didn't form a player the way you wanted, technically speaking, but you formed a stronger character.
You formed a character and a personality. So
exactly. But then you have Vinicius and Rodrygo, and it worked so well taking them before all that, isn't it? I mean, it worked for Real Madrid, so that's why I'm rethinking my theory.
So tell me about Endrick and Estevao, because Endrick has already agreed to go to Madrid, another of those early signings not long after he broke into Palmeiras. He's a central striker, left-footed central striker, but relatively small. And then Estevao was known as Messinho when he was with Cruzeiro as a child, and more of a dribbling number 10 player. And set to go to Chelsea for, we believe, 45 million plus 25 million in bonuses. What do you think of these two players, and which one do you think is going to have the most successful career in Europe?
Oh, that's a big question, isn't it? They are very good. They are very good, and I see them blossoming in European football. But they are already happening, right? I mean, Endrick, as you said, was already signed by Real Madrid. They both have one thing in common. They have a very structured family, and they're very focused. You can see them acting as really, really professional guys. Obviously, we have more data and observation about Endrick, right? Esteban has just become a starter for Palmeiras, so we're just beginning to see him playing here in the big stages of Brazilian football. So one at a time. So Endrick is, as you said, a center forward, very strong but not so tall. He reminds me of Romario for being like a short guy.
Yeah,
but he's very strong. He's very strong, and he's not a skinny, delicate Brazilian product. He's more like a tank. You see, he's a large shoulders and neck. He's very strong, and he's great scorer. He's a great scorer. I can see Endrick working in European football, but I can see it not working as well for some of the reasons we already talked about. Yeah, being short. I mean, it depends a lot on where he gets and which hands will work with Endrick. And I think Ancelotti is a great guy, but Endrick is still turning 18, and I don't think he will play for Real Madrid first team from the beginning. I think they will try to do something similar to what they did to Vinicius, which will be odd because when Vinicius got to Madrid, he wasn't even a starter for Flamengo. He was becoming an important player for Flamengo, but he was far from the national team, for example, while Endrick is already a starter for Brazilian national team. So he will play in Copa America. So it's a bit odd. You get a starter from Brazil team and put in Real Madrid Castilla, for example, the second team. I don't know how Real Madrid will deal with it.
Just to add a bit of information in there, I was told today that although Madrid aren't actively marketing him, that Madrid would be open to selling Rodrygo this summer if they get a good offer for the player, because they have this oversupply of forward.
I think Rodrygo would be a big mistake for Real Madrid selling Rodrygo, because I think Rodrygo is a very, very smart player tactically, and the best is yet to come. And he's proven to be such a scorer in different situations. All the Brazilian coaches love Rodrygo. I spoke personally to Fernando Diniz, the guy who was in charge last year, and Dorival Jr., who is a good friend and who is in charge of Brazil right now. And they love this guy, and I think they love him basically for the same reasons Ancelotti does. He plays everywhere. You can play Rodrygo everywhere. He will play well everywhere, and he scores a lot. He's a better scorer than Vinicius, for example, in my opinion. That would be a mistake, but yeah, you can see that happening. But I can see Real Madrid selling Vinicius, don't you? I mean, if it doesn't work with Mbappe, or if somehow the racism thing is not sorted out in Spain, and it becomes more and more and more of a heavy atmosphere for Vinicius, you can see Real Madrid selling Vinicius, or Vinicius having the desire to leave and play in a healthier championship, healthier league. So, yeah, there are lots of moves that can be made by Real Madrid regarding those players, and then it would open up space for Endrick. And also, maybe they can receive Endrick and not see him as a player ready to rock and roll and get a loan. I don't know, and do something else with him. But playing him in the second team or leaving him on the bench, the way Barcelona did with Vitor Roque, that would end up in a sad story, isn't it?
And Estevao, he won't be able to come to Europe for another year. Do you see him as being immediately ready to play in the Premier League for Chelsea?
Estevao is a different player. He's more of a dribbler, a winger. He can dribble. He's the kind of Brazilian players people got used to love throughout the years. I mean, he's like more magical. I think the nickname Messinho shows well what he's capable of. He exploded before being 14 at Cruzeiro. He was taken by Palmeiras when he was 14. Not a subject. How it happened
for no transfer fee. That's correct.
For no transfer fee, yeah. Or if something happened there, but it happened unofficially with family, agents. And then he obviously worked so well for Brazil, for Palmeiras Youth Academy, which is the best in Brazil right now. Palmeiras was never known in Brazil for forming players, but the last 10 years, they invested so much in personnel and structure, and Palmeiras right now is the main youth academy in Brazil. So he was well worked there in Palmeiras. And Abel Ferreira, who is the Portuguese coach, who is in charge of Palmeiras in the last 4 years, very good guy. Actually, I don't know how European big market hasn't chased him yet. But anyway, Abel Ferreira is starting to use him little by little in the best possible way, I guess. Not throwing him into the lion's cage, but using him in a good moment for Palmeiras, where the pressure is not that high, and he's already playing such a good football. He's already playing so well. He's already the starter for Palmeiras. But I don't think, Duncan, Chelsea is the best fit for him. I'm not saying the Premier League is not the best fit, although I think it would be better for him to go to Spain the way Vinicius and Rodrygo did. I think the Premier League is a harder place for a player like Estevao, and Chelsea is even harder because it's not a well-structured team right now.
With a very difficult age profile. Too many young players, with no experience in English football, no consistency in coaching. And it's interesting. I was looking at some comments from Estevao, and he's been very clear that his preference would be to play in Barcelona, to play in Spanish football. So this is a commercial decision. It's not one that's being taken by the player as his ideal preference of club to go to.
Just one quick thing about it. I think Endrick would fit perfectly in the Premier League right now, and Estevao, his profile is more Spanish league player. I think they're going to the wrong market, but Endrick, as I said, is already a Brazilian national team player. I think he has the tools to become a star in Spain. Estevao will suffer more. And it's a shame because actually it's a family decision and an agent's decision. Palmeiras obviously wants the money. It's a lot of money, but it's a shame that the players, he's 17 years old, doesn't have a voice, isn't it? It's a pity.
Let's talk about agents and the formation of players in Brazil, because you mentioned there that Palmeiras took Estevao from Cruzeiro at age 14 without a transfer fee, and Cruzeiro are one of the big clubs in Brazil. That could never happen in European football, but I think there's a change in the rules governing academies in Brazil, which has allowed a different structure of forming players and taking these super talents or lesser talents as well at a young age without any cost.
Yeah, because we know you cannot sign a professional contract for 5 or 6 years with a 16 years old. I think you can't even in Europe, can't you? Can you?
No, you can't.
Yeah. Actually, FIFA will have to change those limits because as we are saying, players are playing at the big stage where they are 16. So, I mean, what's the point of not allowing them not allowing the clubs to sign big contracts? I mean, football is changing and the rule has to change accordingly. But anyway, that's a different debate. What's happening in Brazil, there is a new rule established by CBF, which is the Brazilian FA, considering some clubs that respect a couple of how can you say that? There are rules and obligations, and if a club has all of these attended, right, they can be considered what we call here like a youth forming club. And then if you have this certificate, you can sign contracts with 13, 14, 15 years old players. Short contracts, but still contracts. Disallow other clubs to just get there and take your player, right?
Yeah.
So it changes the way youth football is working in Brazil. It still is a bit of a jungle because lots of clubs, it's a fist fight because lots of clubs don't have this certificate, don't have the financial conditions to achieve the demanding points from CBF, and then a bigger one or a richer one can get there and convince the family and get a player in the end of the year for free, you see, and just convince him or convince the family or agents to come to a different place to play for a different club. So lots of clubs are rushing to have the forming club certificate so they can protect themselves. It's not an easy task because lots of big clubs in the history of Brazilian football are completely broken financially. Mm-hmm. So they are surviving. They are not living. They are surviving somehow. So the youth academy is not a priority. It should. But yeah, there are lots of clubs losing players to bigger ones. And at the same time, you can see a move taking place here, a wave of clubs being bought or being founded by investors. Sometimes those investors come from financial markets, money markets, or sometimes they are agents. They are already connected to football. And those agents, those guys are literally founding clubs or they are buying clubs. They are buying clubs that already exist and taking over with the intention of forming and selling. And then as you have this new way of signing a contract with a really, really young player, those clubs are actually interested in selling those players to the bigger Brazilian clubs so they can have percentages for future negotiations, right? So, for example, Estevão was taken by Palmeiras from Cruzeiro, but if Palmeiras sell him to Chelsea, which it seems it's going to happen, Estevão will get 30% of it. So Estevão family probably reached this agreement when Palmeiras took him from Cruzeiro. Okay, we go, but we want 30% of
the
ourselves.
transfer fee.
And then, exactly. So it's happening. The negotiations are taking places everywhere in Brazil, and clubs are not going after 16 and 17s. They are going after 13s and 14s. It's something that it's happening right now in Brazil.
And there's another element to the ownership of clubs that's changed recently. It was a 2021 law came in, the SAF, which in this case doesn't stand for Sir Alex Ferguson, although I think we should call it the Fergie Law on the Transfers podcast. It's Sociedade Anônima do Futebol, which is an anonymous society of football. I think it translates that. And for the first time, Brazilian clubs were allowed to be owned as commercial entities rather than as the non-profit organizations that they used to be.
Yeah, actually, you could already buy a club in Brazil, but this new law that you mentioned, the Fergie's Law, it allows the buyer to have so many benefits. Fiscal benefits, tax benefits, and they basically buy a clean club, free of the debts the former club had. So it's a great business, isn't it? I mean,
it's incredible. As I understand it, when John Textor, who's the minority owner of Crystal Palace, majority owner of Lyon, when he bought Botafogo, using this Fergie Law, the society, which was Botafogo previously, which was a non-profit organization, had over R$1 billion of debts. And those were split away from Botafogo Football Club, which Textor now owns.
Exactly. From Botafogo SAF, right?
SAF.
So now you have, you already had this, well, you had that in Europe, right? I mean, what we're living in Brazil is what European football lived in the beginning of the century. You had Abramovich buying Chelsea, and you have the SADs in Portugal, don't you? I mean, you have Porto SAD, Benfica SAD. SAD is basically the same thing as SAF in Brazil.
Except when Abramovich bought Chelsea, he had to deal with the debts that Chelsea already had. He wasn't able to parcel them off and say, we ignore all of that and we start a new football club.
Exactly. In Brazil, it was kind of a tax. How can I say that? When the government kind of allow you to not pay the tax, there's a word for that. I'm missing that in English.
Write off the taxes.
Yeah, for example. And then, it's super debatable. But, football, as you said in the beginning of the show, football is the most important thing of the least important things. I don't know if the sentence is correct in Brazil. I think probably football is one of the most important things, period, in Brazil. So people are okay with the state not getting taxes because they want their clubs to be stronger and stronger. Yeah, it's stupid, but it is as it is. I mean, there was no confrontation from the society because of this new law. So yes, we're having clubs, traditional clubs that are full of debts. They were literally broken if they were proper companies. They are being bought, and this new club that comes up from this negotiation comes up as a clean one. So that's why clubs are being bought right now in Brazil. It's not that it was forbidden before, but it was stupid before. So now it's a big deal for those businessmen, and they are buying clubs, and obviously they are quickly trying to make money with the academies, with youth players. It's becoming a better football atmosphere in Brazil. I have to agree with that. I mean, football is becoming more professional here, and it's becoming better. It's a better product. The Brazilian league is a better product right now than it was 2 or 3 or 4 or 10 years ago. But yes, it's a shame that you have to have a law basically saying, okay, the clubs are still in debt with the state, but we all know those clubs, separate clubs, will never pay those debts.
So a few of the clubs that have used this Fergie Law, we have Red Bull Bragantino, who've been very successful. I'm told, one of the best training centres in Brazil. You have Bahia, which is owned by City Football Group, so that's Manchester City's arm in Brazil. Then you have, and let's talk a little bit about these two, Vasco da Gama, owned by 777 Partners, who are in huge trouble at the moment with their attempted takeover of Everton, which they have until the end of the month to provide the finance for. And there's a lot of doubts as to whether they're able to do it. And then Botafogo, with, as we mentioned, owned by John Textor. Textor has that minority stake in Crystal Palace. He's just announced that he wants to sell the minority stake, which I think will be quite difficult for him to do, and that he's interested in buying Everton in place of 777 Partners. What's your impression of John Textor's stewardship of Botafogo? Has he been a good thing for Brazilian football, or has he been problematic?
And you have, and just before talking about Textor, and you have Cruzeiro, for example, that was the first one. It was bought by Ronaldo, the phenomenal one. It didn't quite work, although Cruzeiro was in second division. They played in second division for 3 years, and Ronaldo took over Cruzeiro, and already sold it, and he got a 200 million reais, which would be 30 million euros, 35 million euros profit from that.
Okay.
And the supporters were not very happy with him, but yeah, he got quite a good profit. He went away crying, saying, "Oh, how he loved Cruzeiro and all that," and how he wasted money and time with it. But yeah, he sold it. He bought it and sold it for much more money than he bought it. And we will be seeing that in the next years, because it's such a big business. You buy a broken club for small money, and then you sell it because the product the product is growing in Brazil. So football is worth more money in Brazil. So it's a big business. Some of those guys are doing, and I think Textor and 777 have this in mind. I'm pretty sure they have this in mind. I don't think Textor is helping out. I think Textor is actually quite a controversial and not very educative person who is in the middle of Brazilian football right now. He came up last year. He bought Botafogo. He bought players. He brought a good coach, Luis Castro. It seemed to me that Botafogo was in the right path. But then Botafogo almost won the league, and nobody expected that, not even them. But eventually they lost it. Botafogo is one of, well, hopefully no Botafogo supporter will hear that, but Botafogo is the smallest of the big clubs in Brazil. And then we all say here that some things only happened with Botafogo. That was one of the things last year. I mean, they had a 14-point lead in the Brazilian league, and they managed to lose it. And when they lost it, Textor came up saying the most absurd things, that the championship was corrupt, that he had proof that CBF wanted Palmeiras to win the league and blah, blah, blah. And obviously it was a whole big lot of bullshit, you see. And he came up with AI agency that could show that those games, some of those games were corrupt, and eventually he came up with some dossiers and information showing that some players of other clubs didn't play the way they were playing in the previous matches when they played against Palmeiras. This was the proof he had. And then obviously he didn't come up with dossiers showing how Botafogo players played below the level in the last 10 rounds of the championship. You see, he would find out that maybe their players sold themselves to someone else, because that was such a stupid thing to do, and he lost all respect he had here in Brazil. Right now in Brazil, nobody respects Textor. The president of Palmeiras, who is a woman, Leila Pereira, banker and owner of Palmeiras, kind of owner of Palmeiras, because she's the president of Palmeiras, and her bank is the main sponsor of Palmeiras. But yeah, Palmeiras is not a SAF. Palmeiras is still a social club, but she kind of owns Palmeiras. She went to court against Textor for everything he said. And he's a black sheep in Brazilian football. But still, yeah, Botafogo bought players. Botafogo is doing well. I think the Textor administration is good for Botafogo, but he is not a good public figure for Brazil. And 777 is one of those suspicious investors. From the beginning, you didn't understand quite well who those guys were. Vasco are already going to court against them for not fulfilling the agreements. And I think Vasco will have a problem. In this case, it's not a solution. It's a problem. Yeah, you already know 777 in England. And I think this is going to happen in Brazil in the next years. There are clubs who will be bought by serious investors, guys who want to make proper money and to invest and to treat football professionally. And there will be adventures that will not sort out any club's life.
Let's do a quick section on one more young player who looks like he's headed to Europe. This is a story we broke on FootballTransfers.com this week. Pedro Lima, who is a 17-year-old right-back at Sport Recife, broke into the first team this season, is being actively pursued by Chelsea. Sports President Yuri Romão was in England this week to discuss a transfer fee with them. I understand that in those conversations, Chelsea offered a guaranteed fee of €7 million with bonuses of a further €3 million, and proposed that the fullback spend next season at their Ligue 1 feeder club, RC Strasbourg. Information I have is that Sport have not agreed to the sale as yet. They're holding out at present for the release clause of €12.1 million. And there is competition for Pedro Lima from Manchester City, who would place him at one of City Football Group's European clubs, and clubs in Italy and Spain. What has Pedro Lima's impact been on Brazilian football in the short time that he's been playing at senior level? I've seen him described in some Brazilian reports as the heir to Cafu.
Yeah, it could be, because every right back that comes up is an heir from Cafu, isn't it? But yeah, he's a very offensive player, attacking right back. He's an old-fashioned Brazilian right back, right? So old-fashioned that he will probably become a right winger in Europe.
Okay,
He's a typical Brazilian right back who attacks very well, with a lot of volume, presence in attack. He's smart. He knows how to cut into the box when needed. but not a good defender. For example, last weekend, Sport lost to Fortaleza 4-1 in the semifinal of the Copa do Nordeste, which is the Northeast big regional tournament here in Brazil. It's a big rivalry, Sport and Fortaleza. Sport lost 4-1, and almost all of Fortaleza goals were scored on his side. You see, using the holes he left. So defensively, Pedro Lima still has a long way to go, but offensively, he's very good. He's very good. He's very good crossing. He's very good getting into the attacking positions. He's very smart. So I have no doubts that whenever he gets to Europe, he will become a right winger instead of a right back. I think that's why so many English clubs are interested in him.
Yeah, I've been told that statistically he's coming out as the best attacking fullback in the two top divisions of Brazilian football at present. Very, very good defensively on one-on-one duels, but positionally, that's the part of the game he has to learn.
Exactly, and then if you get in early, and then this is the case when I think the best thing to do is to get this guy as quickly as possible to Europe, so he can learn more about positioning, and yes, he can play for smaller clubs. And you asked me about how he's seen in Brazil. He's quite unknown in Brazil, Duncan, because Sport is playing for the second division in Brazil. Sport is a very important club locally, one of those medium clubs nationally speaking. So he's playing for second division, and people, apart from people who support sports and sports and who lives in Recife, Pernambuco, the state where sport is based, I think most of the people in Brazil don't actually know Pedro Lima.
Okay, let's finish up with a very quick section on a former player who you know well, who has succeeded in his playing career in one of your former homes, London, and is now a big part of the success at Arsenal, the recovery at Arsenal, Edu. He was made technical director there in 2019 after a period fulfilling a similar role for the Brazil national team, and then previous to that, being director of football at Corinthians, one of São Paulo's biggest clubs. He's promoted to sporting director in 2022, had a big part in bringing Mikel Arteta to the club in 2019, and then this big overhaul of Arsenal's squad, which has seen them finish second in consecutive Premier League seasons. Does it surprise you that Edu has done such a good job as a technical director in the Premier League?
Not at all, Duncan. Not at all. I think Edu is one of the brightest minds in Brazilian football. Yeah, it's an example of how Brazil are losing not only players, but also brighter people that could be helping here. I mean, Edu should be the president of Brazilian FA, in my opinion. You see, he would bring modernization and more professionalism to the Brazilian most important entity regarding football. Yeah, but it's obviously a political thing. It doesn't work like that. It will never happen, probably. It doesn't surprise me at all. Edu, since he was a player at Corinthians, youth team, young guy, he was very smart playing, smart speaking, acting, very, very professional. I had the opportunity to meet Edu when he had just left Arsenal to play for Valencia.
Mm-hmm.
I don't even know if it was the best move of his career. I think it wasn't, actually. But yeah, I mean, he saw the opportunity. His family wanted to go to Valencia. It's such a nice town. You can understand that. And he was playing at the time, but I could see so clearly that he would become an important guy in football when he stopped playing. He suffered with injuries, as we all know. That's why I think his career was not as great as it could have been. But he learned languages. He learned how to manage clubs. He did all he had to do in terms of courses and everything. And then I'm definitely not surprised. And he's very smart regarding when it comes to Brazilian market, isn't he? If you see the guys who were brought by Arsenal, Magalhães, Martinelli, they were very cheap. I mean, they were guys that Edu could manage to see, right, to find. He has this eye to Brazilian market. He has contacts, obviously, with agents, with clubs. He is Brazilian, and I think Arsenal can get a good use of it. But not only that, right? I think he became an international manager, an international person, respected in England, in all the European markets, and I think Arsenal are in good hands. They have a very good sports director.
Julio, thank you for joining us in the Transfers podcast. We look forward, and I think Chelsea and Tottenham fans in particular look forward to you pushing the campaign for Edu to become president of the CBF. and hopefully we can have you on the podcast again before the summer window closes.
Whenever you want, Duncan. You know that we are good friends. So many years we've been talking and meeting. Actually, we haven't met for quite a while. We had to fix this, but yeah, it's always a pleasure to talk to you. Hopefully, I could bring some new information for your audience. And long live Transfer Podcast, my friend.
Thank you, Julio. Thank you. You've been listening to the Transfers podcast, powered by FootballTransfers.com. Please subscribe to our feed on your preferred podcast platform, rate us, review us, and even tell your friends if you really like it. You can follow and message us on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube at Transfers Podcast. And you can follow us on Twitter at TransfersCast. We will follow back. Julio is at Julio Gomes Filho. And if you're a real glutton for punishment, you can follow me at Duncan Castles. Our pod and music is produced by Mark Caulfield at Pro Podcast Production. We'll be back next week. Stay safe, be well, and thank you for listening.